He denied the black baby at birth, but nearly collapsed when he saw her again, wearing a judge's robe. Her first words to him in court? "Mr. Carson, are you prepared to proceed?" Can you imagine facing the child you abandoned, now holding the power to judge you? Comment where you're listening from today. Take a deep breath and feel this one. Harrison Carson's polished leather shoes clicked against the marble floors of the Richmond County Courthouse, each step echoing his confidence. At 58, he was at the pinnacle of his legal career, senior partner at Carson and Associates, with a reputation that commanded both respect and fear in equal measure. Today marked the beginning of the Westridge Pharmaceuticals case, a class action lawsuit that could earn his firm millions and cement his legacy before retirement. Is everything ready, Sharon? Harrison adjusted his custom-tailored suit jacket as his young associate struggled to keep pace. Yes, Mr. Carson. All documents are prepared and the expert witnesses are confirmed. Sharon hesitated. There's just one thing. There's been a last-minute change in the judge assignment. Harrison stopped abruptly. What? Who's presiding now? Judge Ruth Thompson. She was just transferred from Thompson. The name hit Harrison like a physical blow. He steadied himself against the wall, suddenly feeling the weight of his 58 years. Are you absolutely certain? Sharon nodded, confusion evident on her face. Is that a problem, sir? Harrison waved her concern away with practiced composure, but inside, his mind raced with calculations and memories he'd buried 29 years ago. No problem at all. Let's proceed. But it was a problem. Potentially the biggest of his life. What secret from his past could unravel everything he's built? Keep listening to find out. As Harrison entered courtroom 3A, his eyes immediately found the judge's bench, still empty. The irony wasn't lost on him. After winning hundreds of cases, after building his reputation on never being surprised in court, fate had blindsided him completely. 29 years ago, Harrison had been a young, ambitious attorney from Old Richmond money when he'd had a brief relationship with Magda Thompson, a beautiful black law student working as an intern at his father's firm. When she told him she was pregnant, Harrison had made a cold calculation that had seemed necessary at the time. He denied paternity, used his family's influence to discredit her claims, and walked away without looking back. His family name and promising career had been preserved. He'd never seen the child. Now, as the bailiff called the court to order, Harrison watched the side door open. Judge Ruth Thompson emerged, her black robes flowing around her slender frame, her expression serious and composed. At 29, she was remarkably young to be sitting on the bench, a testament to her intelligence and drive. Harrison felt a jolt of recognition. She had his mother's cheekbones, his own determined chin, but her mother's warm brown skin and intelligent eyes. The courtroom rose as she entered. Harrison stood on legs that felt suddenly unreliable. "Good morning," Judge Thompson said, her voice clear and authoritative. "Please be seated. We're here for preliminary motions in Westridge Pharmaceuticals versus Collins et al." She glanced down at her papers, then raised her eyes to scan the courtroom. When her gaze met Harrison's, there was no flicker of recognition, no hint that she knew who he was or what he had done. Why would there be? He had never been part of her life. But Harrison knew. And for the first time in decades, Harrison Carson, the man who had built his reputation on controlling every situation, felt the ground shift beneath his feet. "Mr. Carson, I understand you're representing the defense. Are you prepared to proceed with your motions today?" Judge Thompson asked. Harrison cleared his throat, acutely aware that the future of his biggest case now rested in the hands of the daughter he had denied. "Yes, Your Honor, we are prepared." What Judge Thompson couldn't know was that Harrison had already investigated her background extensively when her name had appeared on the potential judicial appointment list 6 months ago. He had learned that Magda had raised Ruth as a single mother, working multiple jobs to put herself through law school while caring for their daughter. Ruth had excelled academically, graduating top of her class at Howard University before attending Harvard Law. She had worked briefly as a public defender before being fast-tracked to the bench, a rising star whose appointment had been celebrated as breaking barriers. What Harrison had also discovered through discreet inquiries was that Judge Thompson had recently been shaken by a controversial case involving corporate negligence. She had ruled against a powerful company, only to have her decision overturned on appeal amid rumors of judicial tampering. The experience had reportedly left her more cautious, more determined to prove herself beyond reproach. Now, as Harrison prepared to argue his first motion, he realized that everything was at stake, not just the millions from this case, but the reputation he had built over decades, the legacy he hoped to leave, and perhaps something else. Something he hadn't allowed himself to consider in 29 years, a chance to face the consequences of the choice he had made. "Your Honor," Harrison began, his voice steadier than he felt, "we move to dismiss counts 3 through 7 on the grounds that the statute of limitations has expired." Judge Thompson's eyes narrowed slightly. "Interesting approach, Mr. Carson. The plaintiffs allege ongoing harm, which would toll the statute. Are you suggesting that the continued suffering of these families is somehow time-barred?" There was something in her tone, a subtle challenge perhaps, that made Harrison wonder if, somehow, impossible as it seemed, she knew exactly who he was. Could she already know the truth? "Stay with us as the courtroom drama unfolds." Before he could respond, Judge Thompson continued, "The court will review your motion, Mr. Carson. But I should warn you, in my courtroom, technical maneuvers don't outweigh justice." As Harrison took his seat, a cold certainty settled over him. This case, the most important of his career, would either be his crowning achievement or his undoing. And the person who held that power was the daughter whose existence he had denied from the moment he learned of her. What Harrison didn't know yet was that Judge Ruth Thompson had received a mysterious envelope just yesterday, an envelope containing old photographs, letters, and DNA test results that told a story she had never known before. A story about her father. Harrison couldn't focus on the remainder of the day's proceedings. Judge Thompson's words kept echoing in his mind. "In my courtroom, technical maneuvers don't outweigh justice." Had there been a double meaning in her statement? Had she somehow discovered the truth? As the court adjourned for the day, Harrison gathered his documents while observing Judge Thompson. She conferred briefly with her clerk, her manner professional and detached. If she recognized him as anything other than opposing counsel, she gave no indication. "Mr. Carson, a word." Judge Thompson's voice cut through his thoughts. The courtroom had emptied except for her clerk, who was gathering files. Harrison approached the bench, his heart racing with an anxiety he hadn't felt since his first trial 30 years ago. "Yes, Your Honor. I'd like to schedule a meeting in chambers tomorrow morning to discuss some procedural matters related to this case." 8 o'clock sharp. Her gaze was direct, unflinching. "Of course, Your Honor." Harrison maintained his composure despite the alarm bells ringing in his head. Private meetings with judges weren't unusual, but the timing was suspicious. "May I ask what specific matters we'll be discussing?" Something flickered across her face. Disappointment? Anger? It was gone so quickly Harrison wondered if he'd imagined it. Let's just say it concerns historical patterns that may be relevant to current proceedings. Judge Thompson gathered her robes and stepped down from the bench. "Good evening, Mr. Carson." Harrison watched her leave, then pulled out his phone and dialed his investigator. "Fred, I need everything you can find on Judge Ruth Thompson. Personal history, case records, social connections, everything. And I need it tonight." Back in his corner office overlooking the Richmond skyline, Harrison reviewed the preliminary file Fred had compiled on Judge Thompson. Beyond her professional achievements, there was little personal information. No husband, no children. She lived alone in a modest home in a respectable neighborhood. She volunteered at a legal aid clinic twice monthly. Her mother, Magda Thompson, had died of breast cancer 3 years ago. This last detail hit Harrison with unexpected force. Magda was gone. The spirited, brilliant woman he'd once known gone, without his ever speaking to her again after that final, terrible conversation where he'd accused her of trying to trap him, of lying about the baby being his. Harrison opened his desk drawer and removed a hidden key. He walked to the bookcase, shifted aside a leather-bound volume of Virginia state laws, and unlocked a small concealed safe. From it, he withdrew a yellowed envelope he hadn't opened in decades. Inside was a single photograph, a young Magda, smiling radiantly, her pregnancy just beginning to show. He'd kept it, not out of sentiment, he told himself, but as insurance in case she ever tried to renew her claims. But he knew that was a lie. He'd kept it because, even in his coldest moments, he couldn't bring himself to destroy this one reminder of the life he might have had. Harrison's phone rang, startling him. It was Fred. "I found something interesting, Mr. Carson." 3 weeks ago, Judge Thompson requested a leave of absence. The reason cited was personal matters requiring immediate attention. The leave was denied due to her caseload, but she took 3 personal days immediately after. What triggered the request? Harrison asked. Unknown, but here's where it gets interesting. She visited a storage facility in her mother's name that same week, and the day before your case was assigned to her, she contacted a DNA testing service. Harrison's blood ran cold. Who made the request to have her assigned to my case? That's still unclear. The case was originally assigned to Judge Harmon, but there was a last-minute reassignment. The official reason is rebalancing of judicial caseloads, but the timing is suspicious. Find out who requested that change, Fred. Whatever it costs. After hanging up, Harrison poured himself 3 fingers of bourbon and stared out at the city lights. The pieces were falling into place, none of them favorable. If Ruth had discovered his identity, if she had evidence, she could have him removed from the case for conflict of interest at minimum. At worst, if she revealed their connection and his past actions, his reputation would be destroyed. But there was something else troubling him beyond professional concerns, something he hadn't allowed himself to feel in years. Shame. The photograph of Magda lay on his desk, her eyes seeming to follow him with accusation. What kind of man denied his own child? What kind of father had he been? No kind at all, came the answer. The next morning, Harrison arrived at the courthouse at 7:45, determined to take control of the situation. Whatever Judge Thompson knew or thought she knew, he needed to manage this carefully. He found her already in her chambers, reviewing documents. She didn't look up when he entered. "Close the door, Mr. Carson." Harrison did as instructed, then took a seat across from her desk. "Good morning, Your Honor." Judge Thompson finally raised her eyes. For the first time, Harrison noticed how much they resembled his own mother's eyes, a distinctive shade somewhere between amber and brown. "I'll be direct, Mr. Carson. I've received information suggesting you may have a personal connection that could constitute a conflict of interest in this case." Harrison maintained his professional mask. "I'm not aware of any such connection, Your Honor." She opened a drawer and removed a manila envelope, placing it on the desk between them without opening it. This contains DNA test results comparing a sample from Magda Thompson's personal effects to an anonymous submission made to establish paternity. Harrison's throat went dry. "May I ask how you obtained my DNA?" "I didn't say it was yours." Judge Thompson's expression remained neutral, but her eyes hardened. Though that's quite an interesting assumption. Harrison realized his mistake too late. He'd walked right into her trap. The DNA sample came from a water glass you used during a bar association event 3 weeks ago. The results show a 99.8% probability of paternity. She pushed the envelope toward him. "You are my biological father." The words hung in the air between them. Harrison felt dizzy, as though the ground beneath him had finally given way completely. I should recuse myself from this case immediately, Judge Thompson continued, her voice clinical. However, that would raise questions about why. Questions I'm not prepared to answer publicly. Not yet. What do you want? Harrison asked, barely recognizing his own voice. Want? For the first time, her composure slipped, revealing a flash of genuine anger. Do you think this is blackmail, Mr. Carson? That I engineered this situation to extract something from you? Then why reveal this now? Why not recuse yourself without explanation? Judge Thompson leaned forward. Because I need to understand. My mother told me my father died before I was born. 3 weeks ago, I found letters in her storage unit that suggested otherwise. I need to know why you abandoned us, why you denied me. Harrison stared at the woman before him, accomplished, dignified, resolute, everything he might have hoped for in a daughter had he ever allowed himself to hope. It was a different time, he began, the words sounding hollow even to himself. My family had expectations. My career was just beginning. I couldn't what? Take responsibility. Be a man of character. Judge Thompson's composure cracked further. Do you know what my mother sacrificed to raise me? Do you know what it was like growing up without a father, believing he was dead, only to discover he was alive and simply didn't want me? Before Harrison could respond, there was a sharp knock at the door. The clerk entered without waiting for an answer. I'm sorry to interrupt, Your Honor, but there's an urgent matter requiring your attention. It's about the Westridge case. Judge Thompson composed herself with visible effort. What is it? A motion has been filed requesting your immediate recusal from the case, citing personal bias. On what grounds? Harrison asked sharply, his mind racing. He hadn't filed any such motion. The clerk handed a document to Judge Thompson. The motion alleges that Judge Thompson has a personal vendetta against Westridge Pharmaceuticals because her husband died from complications related to one of their products 2 years ago. Judge Thompson's face strained of color. That's absurd. I've never been married. The motion includes documentation suggesting otherwise, Your Honor. Marriage certificate, death certificate, and medical records. Harrison watched as Judge Thompson scanned the documents, her hands trembling slightly. These are forgeries, she whispered, then looked up at Harrison with newfound suspicion. Did you do this? I had nothing to do with this, Harrison said truthfully, equally confused. Someone else wants you off this case badly enough to fabricate evidence. Judge Thompson's eyes narrowed. Or someone wants to ensure I stay on the case by making the recusal request appear fraudulent. She turned to her clerk. Who filed this motion? It came from Andrews and Holcomb, representing a previously undisclosed interested party in the Westridge litigation. Harrison felt the blood drain from his face. Andrews and Holcomb was his firm's most bitter rival, and they had connections to the plaintiffs in the Westridge case. Suddenly, a disturbing possibility emerged. What if someone had discovered his connection to Judge Thompson and was using it to manipulate the case outcome? Mr. Carson, it seems we have more immediate concerns than our personal history, Judge Thompson said, her judicial demeanor returning. Someone is trying to manipulate these proceedings, and I need to know who and why. As Harrison nodded in agreement, his phone buzzed with a text message. He glanced down and felt his world tilt once again. The message from an unknown number contained a single line, "We know about your daughter. Choose wisely in court today, or everyone else will know too." Harrison stared at the text message, his mind racing. Someone knew about Ruth being his daughter and was using that information to blackmail him into manipulating the case. But who? And how had they discovered the secret that had been buried for nearly 3 decades? He looked up to find Judge Thompson watching him intently. Is something wrong? Harrison hesitated. Should he show her the message? They were adversaries by nature, she on the bench, he representing Westridge Pharmaceuticals. But now they shared a secret that made them reluctant allies. Someone knows about our connection, he said finally, turning his phone to show her the message. They're threatening to expose it if I don't choose wisely in court today. Judge Thompson's professional composure faltered again, revealing a flash of vulnerability that reminded Harrison uncomfortably of Magda. Who sent this? Unknown number, but the timing coming right after this fraudulent recusal motion can't be coincidence. Harrison ran a hand through his silver hair. Someone is trying to manipulate the outcome of this case by leveraging our relationship. We don't have a relationship, Mr. Carson, Judge Thompson corrected coldly. We have a biological connection you denied for 29 years. There's a difference. The rebuke stung more than Harrison had expected. Nevertheless, we have a common problem. Someone is threatening both our professional reputations. Judge Thompson paced behind her desk, her robes swishing around her ankles. I need to address this recusal motion immediately. It's based on completely fabricated evidence. I've never been married, much less to someone who died from Westridge's products, which means someone went to considerable trouble to create elaborate forgeries, Harrison pointed out. They wanted you off this case badly enough to commit fraud. Or, Judge Thompson said, fixing Harrison with a piercing look, they wanted to ensure I stayed on the case by making the recusal attempt look suspicious and vindictive. Harrison considered this. Either way, we need to find out who's behind this. We? Judge Thompson raised an eyebrow. Mr. Carson, you represent Westridge Pharmaceuticals. Your obligation is to your client, not to me. My obligation is to the integrity of these proceedings, Harrison countered. And at the moment, that integrity is being compromised by whoever sent this threat. A knock interrupted them. The clerk returned, looking apologetic. I'm sorry, Your Honor, but court is about to reconvene and Mr. Carson, your associate, Miss Patel, is looking for you. She says it's urgent. Judge Thompson straightened her robes. We'll continue this discussion later, Mr. Carson. In the meantime, I expect you to proceed with the utmost professionalism in my courtroom. Harrison nodded and left to find Sharon, who was waiting anxiously in the corridor. Mr. Carson, there's something you need to see. She handed him a tablet displaying a news article from an obscure legal blog. The headline made his blood run cold. Conflict of interest. Sources suggest judge in Westridge case has undisclosed personal connection to defense counsel. The article was vague, citing only anonymous sources close to the case, but it raised questions about Judge Thompson's impartiality based on rumors of a prior relationship with Harrison Carson. This went live 10 minutes ago, Sharon said. It's already being picked up by larger outlets. Harrison felt the noose tightening. Who's behind this blog? It's registered to a shell company. I'm trying to trace it, but keep digging and find Fred immediately. Harrison's phone buzzed with another text from the unknown number. That was just a warning shot. Do as we say, or the full truth comes out. Check your email for instructions. With trembling fingers, Harrison opened his email to find a message with no subject from an anonymous address. The contents were chillingly direct. During today's hearing, you will present a modified expert report that we've attached. The changes are subtle, but will significantly weaken your client's position. Refuse, and by this afternoon, every news outlet in the country will have documentation of how you abandoned your black girlfriend and daughter 29 years ago, used your family's influence to deny paternity, and are now facing that same daughter in court. Your reputation, your firm, your legacy, all destroyed. The choice is yours. Attached was a copy of Westridge's expert report with seemingly minor adjustments that Harrison instantly recognized would catastrophically undermine their case. He felt sick. In nearly 40 years of practicing law, he had never contemplated anything remotely unethical. His reputation for integrity, however ruthless his tactics might sometimes be, was unimpeachable. And now someone was using his greatest moral failure, abandoning Ruth, to force him to commit professional suicide. Back in the courtroom, Harrison took his place at the defense table as Judge Thompson entered. If she was rattled by the threatening text or the news article, she didn't show it. Her face was a perfect mask of judicial impartiality. Before we proceed with scheduled arguments, she began, I must address a motion for recusal filed this morning. The motion alleges I have a personal bias against Westridge Pharmaceuticals due to the death of a spouse who allegedly used their products. These allegations are categorically false. I have never been married, and the documents submitted with this motion appear to be fraudulent. She turned to the plaintiff's counsel. Mr. Andrews, did your firm file this motion? Darren Andrews, a silver-haired attorney with a reputation as cutthroat as Harrison's own, stood. Your Honor, we did not. We were as surprised by its filing as you were. The motion came from your firm's email domain, Judge Thompson pointed out, which appears to have been spoofed, Your Honor. We've already contacted the Bar Association and law enforcement to report this fraudulent use of our firm's identity. Judge Thompson's eyes narrowed slightly. Very well. This motion is denied, and I'm referring this matter for investigation into possible criminal fraud. Now let's proceed with the case. Harrison rose, the modified expert report burning a hole in his briefcase. He had minutes to decide, compromise his professional ethics by presenting the altered report or face the destruction of his reputation and the public humiliation of his daughter. His daughter. The thought jolted him. For the first time, he had mentally acknowledged Ruth as his child, not just a biological connection or a professional problem. And with that acknowledgement came an unfamiliar protective instinct. Whoever was threatening them wasn't just after him. They were using Ruth as a pawn in their game. The revelation of their relationship would damage her career as much as his own. Mr. Carson, you may present your expert's findings, Judge Thompson prompted. Harrison made his decision. Your Honor, before I proceed, I need to bring a serious matter to the court's attention. I have reason to believe there has been an attempt to tamper with evidence in this case. A murmur ran through the courtroom. Judge Thompson's expression remained neutral, but Harrison caught the slight widening of her eyes. That's a serious allegation, Mr. Carson. Please elaborate. This morning, I received an anonymous communication attempting to pressure me into presenting falsified expert testimony. I believe this is connected to the fraudulent recusal motion filed against Your Honor. Darren Andrews was on his feet instantly. Your Honor, this is outrageous. Defense counsel is making unfounded accusations to distract from the merits of this case. I assure you, Mr. Andrews, I have evidence to support these claims, Harrison replied, surprised by the genuine anger in his voice, and I believe someone with connections to this case is attempting to manipulate the proceedings through blackmail and fraud. Judge Thompson studied him carefully, then tapped her gavel. We'll take a 15-minute recess. Mr. Carson, Mr. Andrews, in my chambers. Now. As they filed into her chambers, Harrison felt his phone buzz again. Another message from the unknown number. You've made your choice. Check the Richmond Daily News website in 5 minutes. Before Harrison could process this, Fred burst into the chambers, ignoring the bailiff's protests. Mr. Carson, I've traced the source of those threatening messages. They're coming from. The door flew open again as Sharon rushed in, her face pale. Mr. Carson, Judge Thompson, you need to see this immediately. She held up her tablet, displaying the Richmond Daily News website. The headline made Harrison's heart stop. Breaking. DNA evidence reveals Judge Ruth Thompson is estranged daughter of defense attorney in Westridge case. Below the headline was a photograph of Magda holding infant Ruth alongside a recent picture of Harrison, with graphic lines drawing connections between their facial features. And beside it, scanned copies of the DNA test results proving paternity. The room fell silent as everyone stared at the screen, then at Harrison and Judge Thompson, their secret now exposed to the world. But it was the byline of the article that caused Harrison's blood to run cold, by Rodney Carson, special contributor. His own brother had betrayed him. Rodney. Judge Thompson's voice cut through the stunned silence. Your brother is behind this. Harrison stared at the byline, a cold fury building inside him. Rodney had always resented Harrison's success, had always lived in his shadow at their father's firm. But this level of betrayal went beyond sibling rivalry. "He must be working with someone inside the case," Harrison said, his mind racing. "Rodney doesn't have access to these records or the technical expertise to forge documents." Darren Andrews cleared his throat. "I assure you, neither I nor anyone at my firm had anything to do with this outrageous situation." Judge Thompson's composure remarkably remained intact. "Gentlemen, we have a serious problem. The integrity of these proceedings has been compromised, and my impartiality will now be questioned by every observer." She turned to Harrison. "Mr. Carson, you should contact your client immediately. They need to be aware of this development." Harrison nodded numbly, still processing his brother's betrayal. "Your Honor," Fred interjected, "if I may, the threatening texts came from a burner phone purchased 3 days ago, but I traced the IP address used to access the email account. It connects to the home network of Peter West." Harrison's head snapped up. "Peter West, the CEO of Westridge Pharmaceuticals. My own client is behind this." "It appears so," Fred confirmed. "And there's more. Financial records show payments from a Westridge shell company to Rodney Carson over the past 6 months. Substantial payments." The picture was becoming clearer. Rodney had been feeding information to Peter West, who then used it to attempt to manipulate the case outcome. But why? What was Westridge so desperate to hide that he would resort to blackmail and fraud? Judge Thompson took a deep breath, her judicial demeanor firmly in place despite the personal chaos unfolding. "Mr. Carson, given these developments, I have no choice but to recuse myself from this case and report these events to the Judicial Ethics Committee and the Bar Association." "Your Honor," Harrison began, surprising himself with what he was about to say, "I respectfully request that you don't recuse yourself." Everyone in the room stared at him in shock. "Mr. Carson, are you suggesting I continue to preside over a case involving my biological father?" Judge Thompson's voice held a note of disbelief. "I'm suggesting that whoever is behind this, whether it's Peter Westridge working with my brother or someone else, went to extraordinary lengths to either force your recusal or manipulate the case outcome. They wanted something badly enough to commit multiple crimes to get it." Harrison turned to his associate. "Sharon, what's in the discovery documents for the Westridge case that could be this explosive?" Sharon hesitated. "There are thousands of documents, sir, but there was a set of internal emails the plaintiffs have been fighting to get unsealed." "Westridge has claimed attorney-client privilege." Judge Thompson's eyes narrowed. "I remember those documents. I was scheduled to review them in camera tomorrow to determine if the privilege applies." Harrison felt the pieces click into place. "That's it. Westridge is willing to lose this case, to pay the damages, rather than have those documents become public. Whatever is in those emails must be catastrophic. Criminal liability, perhaps. So he tried to force you to throw the case," Judge Thompson reasoned. "And when that failed, he exposed our relationship to force my recusal before I could review those documents." Andrews, who had been listening intently, spoke up. "Your Honor, if this is true, my clients deserve to see those documents. They could contain evidence vital to their claims." Judge Thompson paced behind her desk, weighing her options. "If I recuse myself now, a new judge will be assigned. The review of those documents will be delayed by weeks, possibly months, during which time Westridge could find another way to bury them," Harrison added. A heavy silence fell over the room as Judge Thompson contemplated the impossible position she found herself in. Finally, she spoke. "I will not recuse myself. Not yet." She held up a hand to silence Andrew's objection. "I will review those documents today, not tomorrow. If they contain evidence of criminal wrongdoing, I will ensure they are preserved before I step down from this case." Harrison felt a surge of respect for her integrity and courage, qualities he recognized from Magda, but also, he had to admit, qualities he had cultivated in himself professionally, if not always personally. "Your Honor," he said, "given the circumstances, I believe I should withdraw as counsel for Westridge Pharmaceuticals. Judge Thompson shook her head. No, Mr. Carson, if you withdraw now, it only serves their interests. We need to proceed methodically. She turned to her clerk. Have the sealed documents brought to my chambers immediately and contact the Chief Judge and the U.S. Attorney's Office. They need to be apprised of the situation. As the clerk hurried out, Judge Thompson faced the others. Gentlemen, we will reconvene court in 1 hour. In the meantime, Mr. Carson, I suggest you contact your client, though I suspect Peter Westridge already knows what's happening. When Harrison called Westridge's office, he was told the CEO was unavailable. No surprise there. Harrison's next call was to his firm's managing partners, explaining the situation before they read about it online. Their reaction was predictably concerned with the firm's reputation rather than the ethical implications, and they immediately began discussing damage control. After hanging up, Harrison found himself alone in an empty conference room, staring at his reflection in the window. In it, he could see echoes of his father, the proud jawline, the steely determination, but also something his father had never possessed: doubt. Harrison had spent his career winning at all costs, justifying his methods with the belief that he was simply being a zealous advocate for his clients. He had compartmentalized his personal and professional ethics, just as he had compartmentalized the memory of Magda and the child he had denied. His phone rang, displaying Rodney's number. After a moment's hesitation, Harrison answered. "Hello, Rodney." "Harry." His brother's voice was tense but unapologetic. "I suppose you've seen the article." "Why?" It was all Harrison could manage without losing his composure. "Why?" Rodney's laugh was bitter. "Because you've had everything handed to you your entire life, Harry. Father's approval, the best cases, the managing partnership that should have been mine. And through it all, your precious reputation remained intact despite what you did to Magda and that child. So this is revenge. You exposed Ruth, damaged her career, just to get back at me." "Ruth." Rodney sounded genuinely surprised. "Is that her name? I never knew. And for what it's worth, I never intended to hurt her. This was between you and me. You took money from Peter West," Harrison pressed. "You helped him try to manipulate a federal case." A pause. "I provided information. That's all. What Westridge did with it wasn't my concern. You'll be disbarred for this, Rodney. Possibly prosecuted." Another pause, longer this time. "So be it. At least I'll have the satisfaction of knowing I finally made the great Harrison Carson face the consequences of his actions." The line went dead, leaving Harrison with a hollow feeling. His brother's resentment had festered for decades, just as Harrison's guilt over abandoning Magda and Ruth had been buried, but never truly gone. A knock at the door interrupted his thoughts. It was Sharon. "Mr. Carson, Judge Thompson is requesting your presence in her chambers." She's reviewed the sealed documents. When Harrison entered Judge Thompson's chambers, he found her sitting rigidly behind her desk, her face ashen. Andrews was already there, looking equally disturbed. "What did you find?" Harrison asked. Judge Thompson slid a folder across the desk. "Evidence that Westridge knew their drug caused fatal liver damage in certain populations, specifically African Americans with a particular genetic marker, 3 years before it went to market. They suppressed the data, altered test results, and proceeded with FDA approval." Harrison felt sick as he scanned the documents. These emails, they're discussing how the potential profits outweighed the acceptable losses in minority communities. 873 people died, Andrews said quietly. Most of them Black. "My clients' families." Judge Thompson's voice was steady but fierce. "This isn't just civil liability. This is criminal fraud, potentially homicide. And your client, Mr. Carson, was willing to leverage my personal history, my very identity, to keep this hidden." Harrison looked up from the documents to meet her gaze. In her eyes, he saw not just anger, but deep disappointment. the same look Magda had given him 29 years ago when he denied responsibility for their child. The U.S. Attorney and FBI are on their way, Judge Thompson continued. But before they arrive, I need to know where you stand, Mr. Carson. Are you still representing Westridge in this matter? It was the most important question of Harrison's career, perhaps of his life. His answer would define not just his professional legacy, but his moral one as well. And for the first time, looking into the eyes of the daughter he had abandoned, Harrison found himself weighing more than just the legal implications of his decision. Before he could answer, his phone buzzed with a text. It was from Peter Westridge himself. I have more on your daughter than just her paternity, Carson. Stand with us, or watch her career and reputation burn completely. Harrison stared at Peter Westridge's text message, a cold fury building inside him. After decades of representing corporate clients, of prioritizing professional success over personal ethics, he finally understood the true cost of the choices he had made. He had compromised himself once before when he abandoned Magda and their unborn child. He would not make the same mistake again. Mr. Carson, Judge Thompson prompted, her voice breaking through his thoughts. I asked where you stand in this matter. Harrison looked up, meeting her gaze directly. I'm withdrawing as counsel for Westridge Pharmaceuticals, effective immediately, and I'm prepared to provide a sworn statement regarding the attempted blackmail and evidence tampering. Andrews nodded approvingly, while Sharon looked shocked but relieved. Judge Thompson's expression remained carefully neutral, though Harrison thought he detected a flicker of surprise and perhaps respect in her eyes. Very well, she said. I'll instruct the court clerk to note your withdrawal. Westridge will need to secure new counsel quickly. They'll have more pressing concerns than finding a new lawyer, Harrison replied, sliding his phone across the desk to show Westridge's text message. This constitutes additional evidence of witness tampering and attempted blackmail of a federal judge. Judge Thompson read the message, her composure momentarily faltering. He claims to have more information about me. What could he possibly have? Harrison shook his head. It's likely a bluff. But even if it isn't, whatever he has doesn't change what needs to happen here. Those documents prove Westridge knowingly marketed a drug that killed people, predominantly African Americans. They need to be held accountable. The door opened, and the clerk entered. Your Honor, the U.S. Attorney and FBI agents have arrived, and there's a situation in the courtroom. Peter Westridge is there, demanding to speak with Mr. Carson. Harrison exchanged a look with Judge Thompson. It seems Mr. Westridge has decided to address this personally. He's making a mistake, Judge Thompson said. He's made several, Harrison agreed. When they returned to the courtroom, they found Peter Westridge, a tall, imposing man in his 60s with silver hair and a tailored suit that screamed wealth and power, arguing with the bailiff. Two FBI agents stood off to the side, observing the scene with professional interest. Mr. Carson, Westridge called out, his voice carrying across the courtroom, we need to discuss this situation immediately. There's nothing to discuss, Peter, Harrison replied calmly. I've withdrawn as counsel for Westridge Pharmaceuticals. Westridge's face flushed with anger. You can't withdraw. You have a duty to your client. I also have a duty as an officer of the court, Harrison countered. A duty I'm finally taking seriously. The U.S. Attorney, a serious-looking woman in her 40s, stepped forward. Mr. Westridge, I'm Amanda Chun from the U.S. Attorney's Office. We have some questions regarding certain documents that have come to light in this case. Westridge ignored her, his attention fixed on Harrison. You're throwing away 30 years of partnership over this. Think carefully about what you're doing, Harrison. I have thought carefully, Harrison said. For the first time in a very long time. Westridge's expression darkened. Then he turned to Judge Thompson. Your Honor, did you know your mother was investigated for insurance fraud shortly before her death? That she was about to be indicted when cancer conveniently took her. Judge Thompson stiffened, her eyes widening in shock. That's a lie, Harrison said sharply. Is it? Westridge smiled coldly. I have copies of the investigation files. Seems like dishonesty runs in the family, or at least on the maternal side. Harrison saw the pain flash across Ruth's face, quickly masked by judicial composure. But he recognized it, the same pain he had caused decades ago when he denied her and Magda. Mr. Westridge, Judge Thompson said, her voice remarkably steady, you are now attempting to intimidate a federal judge in open court. I suggest you stop speaking and consult with an attorney immediately. An investigation doesn't equal guilt, Peter, Harrison added. But what your company did, knowingly marketing a drug that killed people based on their race, that's not in question anymore. The emails confirm it. The U.S. attorney stepped closer. Mr. Westridge, in light of the evidence that has emerged, I'm placing you under arrest for fraud, obstruction of justice, and witness tampering. There will likely be additional charges after we complete our investigation. As the FBI agents moved to take Westridge into custody, he lunged toward Judge Thompson's bench. This is all your fault, he shouted. If you had just recused yourself when those false documents were filed, none of this would have happened. The confession hung in the air as the agents restrained him. Westridge seemed to realize his mistake, his face draining of color. Thank you for confirming your involvement in that fraud, Mr. Westridge, Judge Thompson said coolly. I'm sure the U.S. attorney will add that to the growing list of charges. As Westridge was led away, Harrison approached the bench. Your Honor, regardless of Mr. Westridge's accusations, I believe you should now recuse yourself from this case. The circumstances demand it. Judge Thompson nodded. I agree, Mr. Carson. I'll be filing my recusal and a complete report with the chief judge immediately. She paused, then added in a lower voice, but I want you to know that my mother was not guilty of fraud. She was falsely accused by a vindictive insurance company when she filed claims for my medical treatments as a child. Harrison felt a stab of guilt. Medical treatments? Were you ill? I had a congenital heart condition, Judge Thompson said, her expression unreadable. It required multiple surgeries when I was young. My mother nearly bankrupted herself, paying for my care. Care I might have received through your family's insurance had you acknowledged me as your child. The weight of this revelation hit Harrison like a physical blow. While he had been building his career, advancing through the ranks at his father's firm, his daughter had been fighting for her life, and Magda had been fighting to save her alone. I didn't know, he managed, the inadequacy of his response painfully obvious. No, Judge Thompson agreed. You didn't because you chose not to know. She gathered her papers and stood. This court is in recess, pending reassignment to a new judge. Harrison watched her leave, the gravity of his past choices crushing down on him. He had abandoned his child when she needed him most. No professional accomplishment, no legal victory could ever compensate for that failure. Later that evening, Harrison sat alone in his office, surrounded by the trappings of his successful career, awards, photographs with influential people, the view of Richmond from his corner office. All of it suddenly meaningless. A knock at his door roused him from his thoughts. It was Fred. I found something you should see, his investigator said, placing a file on Harrison's desk. It's about Judge Thompson's mother. Harrison opened the file hesitantly, finding copies of the insurance fraud investigation Westridge had mentioned. As he read through the documents, the truth became clear. Magda had been falsely accused by an insurance company looking to avoid paying for expensive treatments. The case had eventually been dropped for lack of evidence, but not before causing Magda significant financial and emotional distress. There's more, Fred said, indicating the second half of the file. Judge Thompson followed in her mother's footsteps in more ways than one. After becoming a judge, she ruled against that same insurance company in a landmark case that exposed their pattern of denying claims to minority policyholders. Her ruling set a precedent that changed industry practices. Harrison felt a complex mixture of emotions, pride in his daughter's accomplishments, regret for his absence from her life, and shame for his part in making her journey so much harder than it needed to be. His phone rang, an unknown number. With some trepidation, he answered. "Mr. Carson, this is Judge Thompson's clerk. She's requested a meeting with you tomorrow morning at 7:30 in her chambers before court convenes with the new judge. Will you attend?" "Yes," Harrison said without hesitation. "Tell her I'll be there." After hanging up, Harrison turned to the photograph on his desk, one of himself receiving an award for legal excellence. For the first time, he saw himself as Ruth must see him, a man who had achieved success at the expense of his integrity, a father who had turned his back on his child. Tomorrow would be his chance to face her, not as opposing counsel, not as a legal adversary, but as the father who had failed her. The question was, after 29 years of absence, what could he possibly say to make amends? As he was about to leave his office, his phone rang again. This time it was Darren Andrews, lead counsel for the plaintiffs. "Carson, you need to turn on the news now." Harrison switched on the television in his office to see breaking news. Peter Westridge had been found dead in his holding cell, apparently by suicide. But more shocking was the accompanying story. Files had been anonymously leaked to the press, revealing that Westridge Pharmaceuticals had specifically targeted predominantly Black communities for marketing their deadly drug, knowing the genetic predisposition for adverse reactions was highest among African Americans. And at the bottom of the screen, a ticker displayed another bombshell: Rodney Carson arrested in connection with evidence tampering and judicial interference. The reckoning had begun, but it was far from over. Harrison arrived at the courthouse at 7:15 the next morning, 15 minutes before his scheduled meeting with Judge Thompson. The building was largely empty, though a few reporters lingered outside, hoping to catch anyone involved in what the media was now calling the Westridge scandal. Harrison slipped in through a side entrance, avoiding their questions. The events of the previous 24 hours had transformed the landscape of his life. Peter Westridge's suicide had sent shockwaves through the legal and business communities. The leaked documents revealing Westridge's targeted marketing to Black communities had ignited public outrage, and Rodney's arrest had been a painful reminder that the roots of this scandal reached into Harrison's own family. Harrison had spent a sleepless night contemplating what he would say to Ruth. What words could possibly address 29 years of absence? What apology could compensate for missing her childhood, her struggles with illness, her achievements? When he reached her chambers, he found the door ajar. Judge Thompson Ruth sat at her desk, reviewing documents, still wearing her street clothes rather than her judicial robes. Without the bench between them, without the formality of the courtroom, she looked younger, more vulnerable, and the resemblance to Magda was even more striking. "Come in, Mr. Carson," she said without looking up. "Close the door behind you." Harrison did as instructed, then stood awkwardly, unsure whether to sit without being invited. "Please sit," she said, finally meeting his gaze. Her eyes were tired but clear. "Thank you for agreeing to meet with me," Harrison began, his carefully rehearsed speech suddenly forgotten. "I know this can't be easy." "Nothing about this situation has been easy," Ruth replied, her voice steady. "But given the circumstances, I felt we needed to speak privately before the media narrative completely overtakes reality." She slid a folder across the desk to him. "This contains my official statement to the Judicial Ethics Committee regarding the Westridge case. I wanted you to see it before it becomes public." Harrison opened the folder and scanned the document. It was a clear, factual account of the events, the discovery of her biological connection to Harrison, the fraudulent recusal motion, Westridge's attempted blackmail, and her decision to recuse herself after reviewing the sealed documents. It was professional, detached, and scrupulously honest. "Thank you for showing me this," Harrison said. "It's a fair accounting." "It's the truth," Ruth corrected, "something that seems to have been in short supply throughout this case and throughout my life." The implied accusation hung in the air between them. "Ruth," Harrison said, using her first name for the first time, "I can't change the past. I can't undo the choice I made 29 years ago. But I want you to know that I deeply regret abandoning you and your mother. Ruth's expression remained carefully neutral. Why did you do it? I need to understand. Harrison took a deep breath. The question was one he had avoided asking himself for decades. I was young, ambitious, and cowardly, he admitted. I came from a family with specific expectations. A black girlfriend and a mixed-race child weren't part of the plan my father had for me. He shook his head. But that's not an excuse. Plenty of men faced those same pressures and made better choices. The truth is, I chose my career and reputation over my responsibility to you and your mother. Did you ever think about us, wonder how we were doing? There was a slight tremor in Ruth's voice now, the first crack in her composure. Yes, Harrison said softly. More than you might believe. I kept tabs on your mother through mutual acquaintances. I knew when you were born. I knew when you graduated high school, college, law school. I told myself it was better not to interfere, that you were doing well without me. Better for whom? Ruth asked sharply. Not for my mother, who worked 3 jobs to pay for my medical treatments. Not for me, growing up without a father, believing he was dead. Harrison flinched at the justified anger in her voice. You're right. It was better for me, not for you. It was selfish. A silence fell between them, heavy with 29 years of absence. Your mother, Harrison finally said, Magda, she was remarkable. The way she raised you, educated you, supported you through your illness, all on her own. I've accomplished a lot in my career, but nothing as important as what she did. Something softened in Ruth's expression. Yes, she was remarkable. She never spoke ill of you, you know. When I asked about my father, she told me he had been a brilliant lawyer who died before I was born. She said I had his eyes and his determination. You do, Harrison said, his throat tight with emotion. You have her courage, though, her integrity. Ruth studied him for a long moment. I've spent the last few weeks trying to hate you. When I found those letters in my mother's storage unit, when I confirmed you were my father and learned you had denied me, I wanted to hate you. I would understand if you did, Harrison said quietly. That's just it, Ruth replied. I thought I would hate you when we finally spoke like this. But now, seeing you here, hearing your regret, I mostly feel sad. Sad for the relationship we never had. Sad for my mother, who deserved better. Sad even for you, missing out on being part of our lives. Harrison bowed his head, accepting the weight of her words. I don't deserve your forgiveness, Ruth. I'm not asking for it, but I want you to know that I'm proud of the woman you've become. Your strength, your principles, your commitment to justice. You are everything I should have aspired to be. I didn't become who I am because of you, Ruth said. But despite your absence, my mother made sure of that. I know, Harrison acknowledged, and I will always be grateful to her for that. Ruth stood and walked to the window, gazing out at the city awakening below. What happens now? The media will continue to focus on our relationship, trying to make it the story rather than Westridge's crimes. I've prepared a statement taking full responsibility for my actions 29 years ago, Harrison said. I'll make it clear that you never knew about our connection until recently, that you handled the situation with complete professionalism, and your career, your reputation. Harrison smiled ruefully. For the first time in my life, I find I care more about doing what's right than preserving my reputation. Whatever happens professionally, I can accept it. Ruth turned back to face him. You should know I've been offered a position on the Federal Appeals Court. This scandal could jeopardize that. I'll do everything in my power to ensure it doesn't, Harrison promised. Your career shouldn't suffer because of my past mistakes. Or because I did the right thing in the Westridge case, Ruth added. Especially not for that, Harrison agreed. The truth about Westridge Pharmaceuticals needed to come out. The families of those who died deserve justice. Ruth nodded, then reached into her desk drawer and removed a small, worn photograph. She handed it to Harrison. It was a picture of herself as a young girl, perhaps 7 or 8 years old, in a hospital bed. Despite the medical equipment surrounding her, She was smiling broadly, his eyes, full of determination. "This was after my third heart surgery," Ruth explained. "My mother took it to remind me that I was stronger than my circumstances, that I could overcome anything." Harrison stared at the image of his daughter, this child he had never known, fighting for her life while he had been climbing the corporate ladder, oblivious to her struggles. "I can never get those years back," he said, his voice breaking. "I can never be the father you needed then. But if you're willing, I would like the chance to know you now, not to replace what was lost, but to build something new." Ruth was quiet for a long moment. "I don't know if that's possible," she finally said. "But I'm willing to find out. Not for your sake, but for mine and for my mother's." She always believed in second chances. It wasn't forgiveness. Not yet. It wasn't the reunion Harrison hadn't even known he wanted until he'd seen her on the bench. But it was a beginning. "That's more than I deserve," Harrison said honestly. "Thank you." As they walked together out of the chambers, prepared to face the media storm that awaited them, Harrison felt something he hadn't experienced in decades. Hope. Not for his career or reputation, but for the possibility of redemption, of becoming the man his daughter could respect, even if she might never love him as a father. Outside, on the courthouse steps, cameras flashed and reporters shouted questions. Harrison stepped to the microphones, Ruth standing a respectful distance behind him. 29 years ago, I made the worst mistake of my life," he began, his voice clear and steady. "Today, I'm taking the first step toward making amends." The journey would be long and uncertain. The wounds of abandonment couldn't be healed with a single conversation or public statement. But as Harrison spoke his truth for the first time, with his daughter bearing witness, he understood that some journeys, however delayed, were worth taking. And some bonds, even those neglected for decades, could potentially be forged anew, not as they should have been, but as they could still become. If you've made it this far, thank you. This wasn't just a story about justice, it was about facing the past and choosing to be better, even if it's decades too late. If this moved you, consider subscribing, and I'll see you in the next one.